Okay, so for better or for worse, I asked y'all, the youth, to give me controversial issues that are important to your generation, and then I listed them, and we work our way up the list from the least concerned to the most concerned, and we're up to our top two issues, and number two ends up being the abortion debate. And so before we get started on the particulars, I want to make sure we understand a couple of things. We lay a foundation, because if you enter into this issue with wrong thinking on a couple of things, it can lead you to some very compassionate, it's not even a word, so some very non-compassionate, very non-graceful, very non-Christ-honoring attitudes. And so we don't want to do that. So two things I want to make sure we understand. Number one, we are made in the image of God. Genesis chapter 1 plainly says where God makes humanity, he creates them in his image. And you can discuss what all that means, but at the core of what I want to understand is that human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. We're separate from, we're special from, we're different from the rest of creation. And so we have this special worth. There's actually an intrinsic, inherent value and worth given to us by God, that just by virtue of being a human, we are worthy and valuable in the eyes of our Creator. And as you enter into any kind of contentious, argumentative discussion or debate where emotions can flare, you need to understand that other person that you want to think badly of, they are just as valued, just as worthy, just as much in the image of God as you are. And so the second thing is, in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul gives a list and says, hey, don't you understand? Here's all of these things, these horrible, evil, despicable, sinful things. These people will not inherit the kingdom of God. But some of you used to be that. We're sinners saved by grace. Every last one of us is a sinner. Our sin may be different, but let's not harmfully judge the sin of the other person and condemn that other person and look down on that other person because their sin, because you have your own sin. And you're not saved because you're so wonderful. God saved you because he is wonderful. God didn't save you because you're so great. He saved you because he is great. And so before we get all worked up about I'm better than you and oh, I can't believe you would do such a horrible thing, stop for a minute and remember. He loves you because he loves you. He values you, not because you're so wonderful. And then when we keep those two things in mind as you go into a contentious situation, it can help to put aside the things that could spring up hatred and dissension and hurt feelings. So let's always keep those in mind as we address these issues. And so, just to present things, let's see what we got. Okay, and so the arguments for abortion. Those who say abortion is just fine, abortion is okay, go for it, knock yourself out, nothing wrong. One of the arguments is it's not a human being. It's not even a human person. It's not a human, it's just a glob of cells, it's just a fetus, it's just some tissue, it's not really alive, and so there's no big deal. So you're not killing anything, you're not murdering anything, it's just some cells, it's not a life, it's not a human being, it's a fetus, not the same thing. And that would be their argument. Another one is extreme circumstances. You'll usually get someone bringing up something like rape or incest or health of the mother or potential disability or malformity on the baby, right? The baby's not going to be born healthy, so wouldn't that be bad? I mean, a woman has been raped. The baby will be a constant reminder of the horrible trauma that was inflicted upon her. You really want to have to force that woman to go through that? What about in the case of incest? Not only do you have possibly the rape thing going on with the trauma, but now you also have the genetic malformities that can come about from the baby because incestuous relationships produce malformed children. So what, are you going to force that? What about the health of the mother? Some women can't carry a baby. So some women, it's too taxing and too threatening on their health and their situation. What about, the kid's going to have Down or autism and things like that? We can have those tests. You want to bring a child into this world automatically knowing it's going to suffer and not live a full and happy, fulfilled life. And you want to bring that child into the world? That just seems so crazy. That's so mean. Of course abortion would be allowed in those situations. And that is the argument. That's how that is presented. Woman's body, woman's choice. Look, it's her body. She's the one who has to be carrying this thing. Who are you to tell her what she can and cannot do with her body? If she doesn't want to carry a baby in her body, she doesn't have to. It is her choice and no one else's. And then I heard this one, and it was kind of weird, but I'll throw it out there, and I'll try to not, I'll make fun of it later. No, consent to have sex is not consent to be pregnant. Look, sex is natural. We all have these urges. It's like scratching an itch, okay? Just because I want to fulfill that pleasure doesn't mean I should have to have a baby. Okay, just because I wanted to have sex does not mean I should have to have a baby. Sex and pregnancy, two different things. Just because I want one doesn't mean you can force the other one on me. And those are the typical arguments that I hear, have seen about people who argue for abortion. Now, what are the arguments against abortion? Well, first off, the idea that it's not a human being. These are all going to kind of parallel the others and I believe shoot them out of the water. The idea that it's not a human being. It is a human being. It has unique DNA. Even whenever it's nothing but a clump of cells and just starting to form, if you were to take one of those cells and examine the DNA, it is its own unique biological life form. Okay, if scientists go to Mars and they find some bacteria, they freak out saying, there's life, there's life, there's life. But for some reason, human life, own unique cells, DNA, just because it's not a fully functioning walking around person, it's not human life? Well, that doesn't make much sense. So to kind of help with that distinction, there is an acrostic that you can remember to help you point out the issues about what is the difference between a human being and an unborn human being. And it's the initials SLED, S-L-E-D, where the S is size. What's the difference between a fetus that gets aborted and a human being who has worth and value? Size. The fetus is smaller than the person out walking around who's already been born. Well, size, what does that matter? I'm bigger than my 8-month-old. Does that mean I can kill my baby? I'm bigger than my 4-year-old. She's inconvenient. Does that mean that I can end her life? I'm bigger than my wife. She's too much of a drain on my financial stuff. Can I abort her? No, that doesn't make any sense because size doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter with the fetus either. The L is level of development. One of the arguments is that it's not really a person yet. It's developing. Maybe it's potentially a person, but it's not a person yet. It's not developed. Well, I'm more developed than my 8-month-old. I'm more developed than my 4-year-old. We're all in different stages of development. Does development have anything to do with worth and value of a human being outside of the womb? No. So then why do we draw that imaginary line and not extend that same thing to life inside of the womb? Level of development, it doesn't mean anything. We don't use that criteria outside the womb. Why should we use it inside the womb? Environment. Does the baby changing locations from inside the womb take a trip down the birth canal into the world, and does that now suddenly change its worth and value? Right? Does being actually going through the act of birth suddenly give worth and value to the baby? No. It's just a matter of where it's at. It's in the womb, it's out of the womb. Either way, it's still a human life. degree of dependency. Okay? They say, well, it can't survive on its own. It's completely dependent on the mother, so its life doesn't count somehow. But dependency, again, referring to my own children. I have an 8-month-old and a 4-year-old. They're both very dependent on mom and dad. The 8-month-old, practically, completely and totally dependent. She's finally mobile, so we don't have to carry her everywhere. Does that mean I can abort my 8-month-old? Right? She's very dependent. And so her life is less valuable than mine because I'm not as dependent. No, degree of dependency has nothing to do with a person's worth and value. But for some reason, we want to say that in the womb it does. But it doesn't add up. It doesn't follow. It doesn't make any sense. And here are some facts as you think about that undeveloped thing in the womb at 8 weeks. Okay, most women, some women don't even know they're pregnant at 8 weeks. Hardly any abortions take place before 8 weeks, but at 8 weeks, you have babies sucking their thumb, you have babies responding to sound, you have evidence that they seem to be dreaming, they will pull away and recoil from pain. If a doctor has to draw blood or something, we actually see them reacting to the needle and drawing away from the pain. All major organs are functioning. Heart, liver, kidneys, they're all in there doing the things that they're doing. The brain and the nervous system is working. That's why it draws away from pain. And they have a fingerprint. And this is all at 8 weeks. At 21 weeks, a baby can survive outside of the womb with just a little bit of help from doctors. At 21 weeks, what's a pregnancy term? 40 weeks? So not even half term, or a little over half, they can be born. And with just a little bit of help, they can survive outside of the womb. Here's the kicker. Most abortions take place after 21 weeks. At 21 weeks, a baby can survive outside of the womb, and most abortions happen after that. It just does not add up there. Okay? Some people want to say the extreme circumstances. What about rape? What about incest? What about potential? Here's the thing. You do not make universal rules based on extreme and rare circumstances. If you were to take rape and incest and deformity and possible health risk and life of the mother, if you were to take all of that together, you're still only talking about a few percentage points. So that still wouldn't have anything to do with over 90% of the abortions that take place. So, okay, because of this, 3, 4, 5% of instances, you want to say the other 95% that have nothing to do with that are okay? No, we don't make rules like that. You make rules that apply to everything based on the general principle, and then maybe you make some caveats and some exceptions for the exceptional things. But the extreme and rare circumstances do not dictate general universal rules that apply across the board. If there are things to consider within those situations, fine, consider them. But you do not use rare and extreme circumstances to make general rules. This idea that it's the woman's body, yes, it's the woman's body that's going to carry the baby, but it is the baby's body. It's the baby's body. It has its own separate DNA, its own separate fingerprint, brainwaves, heartbeat. Aside from the fact that it's relying on the woman's body for sustenance, it's not the woman's body. The woman's body is not the one that's getting aborted. It's not hers to do with as she pleases. It is a separate human being that happens to be inside her body, but it's not about her body. It's not the issue. Which brings to the other point, this idea that somehow not wanting to have sex or not wanting to be pregnant but wanting to have sex is okay. Here's the thing. Where do babies come from? Babies are the natural product of sex. If you do not want to have a baby, it's very easy. You don't have sex. Here's this idea of personal responsibility. When you enter into a situation, there is a certain amount of risk. And by choosing to enter into a situation, you're accepting the risk. You're accepting that it's entirely possible that the thing you don't want to happen could happen. If you decide to go shoplift, maybe you're really good at it, well, there's still a chance that you could get caught. And so you're kind of accepting the fact that if you get caught, you're going to have to pay a fine or do some jail time or something. Right? There's going to be consequences if things don't go the way you planned. And since babies are the natural outcome of sex, and you want to have sex, well, then there's always the risk you might have a baby. And no contraception is 100%. I know people who have lots of babies who were born while condoms are being used, birth control is being used, diaphragms are being used, all kinds of different birth control and contraceptions that are out there are not 100%. So whenever you have sex, there's at least a risk that you're going to have a baby. So how is it even remotely possible that consent to have sex does not equal consent to be pregnant? You're entering into the activity whose natural outcome is a baby. If you did not want your body to have a baby, then you should not have done the thing that produces babies. This is where I like to joke and say, yes, I'm pro-choice and pro-life. There are lots of choices that get made up to the point of being pregnant. You have all the freedom in the world to make those choices. But once that baby is born, it's no longer just about you. Or not born. Once that baby is conceived, it is no longer just about you. There's now another life besides your life that is in the equation. And it is the height of arrogance and selfishness to say, no, no, no. That life doesn't count. It's all about me. You have some personal responsibility. You did the deed. Things didn't turn out the way you wanted. Now you get to own those consequences. But you do not get to end the life of another human being because it's inconvenient for you. That's not the way life works. So what does the Bible say? Well, there's a few verses that and I think kind of lend a little bit of credence to it. There is Psalm 139:13, talking to God, a prayer of praise, where he's saying, you formed my inward parts, you covered me in my mother's womb. Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed, this is God speaking to Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. So there is life, that the person who the baby is exists prior to being born. Luke 1:41, John the Baptist and Jesus, which by the way they're like second cousins, their moms are cousins. Whenever their moms came together, Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mom, was 6 months pregnant. Mary had just been conceived of the Holy Spirit to have Jesus. Through the Holy Spirit, John the Baptist in his mother's womb recognizes the Spirit of Jesus in his mother's womb and reacts to that. So there's something spiritual going on with the baby. So an unborn baby, not only does it have unique DNA and fingerprints and its own heartbeat and its own brain waves and all of that jazz, but there's also some spiritual activity going on in there as well. How is this not a human life that needs protecting? And then, of course, you have Exodus chapter 20, verse 13, 10 Commandments. You shall not murder. And I know people don't like that word. I know that we want to use other euphemisms and softer language, and that's necessary. There are times when we're talking to someone, like I said, use compassion, use grace. Don't hate on the person. And if using the M word is going to create problem, find a different way to say it. But just straight right here in this time talking about it, when you end the life of an innocent human being, that is murder. I don't know any other way to describe it. The thing in the womb is a unique human life. It is innocent. It has done nothing wrong. It has done nothing to you to justify you ending its life. The only word that describes that is murder. Unfortunately, we live in a culture that doesn't see it that way. And we live in a time where people's minds and hearts are darkened to the truth. And we live in a time where it's legal, supported by the government, to end the life of your child because they're inconvenient to you. My hope is that as you kind of internalize this information, that as you kind of make it a part of your just knowledge base as you go through life, that this not be something that you use to attack and beat down other people. Like I said, we are all created in the image of God, and we are all sinners in need of grace, and so we do not use the truth as a club, but as an open hand. If nothing else, this should be as a shield to protect against you. So if you're in the situation, you have information to say, no, you know what? I do know something about this, and that is a human life. We don't go out and go, hey, you killed your baby, or you shouldn't do that. We use this for ourselves to strengthen our own faith and our own convictions, as a shield to protect against temptation for us to do the same. But when it comes to those who have done it or considering doing it, our response should be one of compassion and love, of reaching out, not of clubbing them with the facts. What they need is someone who cares, not just someone who could argue. Jesus said to love our neighbors. So let's go love our neighbors.